thank you for being here, and this is a great panel, and I'm excited for everybody to come in. So, sitting up here already is Emmy-nominated writer David Radcliffe. And David is also the co-chair of the WGA PWD Writers Committee. So I'm excited to have him up here about inclusion for disability starting the right way. And next up, Doug Rowland. Come on in, Doug. Doug had a film. He's a past Slamdance alumni. Doug did a film with a deaf-blind actress and was nominated for an Academy Award, actually. So Doug's here to talk about his experience working with disability in film. Next up, executive producer Jen Court. Jen has worked in television and film, and you've probably seen some of her work on television in a little show called Leverage, I think. Incidental, but anyway, next, we'll bring up the most wonderful friend I've ever known, the greatest casting director that's ever hit Hollywood, and Russell Boast. He's past president of the CSA, Casting Society of America, and now is teaching casting, which is including inclusion at Dodge College of Film and Media at Chapman University. It's in another country in Orange County. If you have to get on the 405, I can't get there. Russell. And then on the end down here, somebody that I ran into a couple of years ago, 7 years ago, when they were starting to do this film called Daruma. And it was a project that was 17 years in the making. And I think 7 or 8 years ago, we got auditioned. And my friend Toby and I auditioned, and we stuck with them. But Kelly wrote and produced the film Daruma, which is the first film in the history of American filmmaking over 100 years to have both lead actors authentically cast with disabilities. It had a really great limited theatrical run in like 7 major cities: New York, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, Washington, D.C., and now it's on streaming. You can find it on Amazon and Apple. Okay, go home now, look on Amazon and Apple, and watch the film. And then my best friend from a long time to be our moderator. He's won 2 Golden Globes, 2 Academy Awards, some kind of thing like that, and a whole bunch of other awards for his films, Mr. Peter Farrelly.
Thank you very much. Thanks all for being here. Really appreciate it. This is a big day. I want to start with Russell, if that's okay. Yeah, by the way, we're just going to have a conversation. I don't plan things ever well, so I'd rather not plan at all. But I've been saying this for 25 years that the people that we have to get to in this business, and you're one of the ones that we have gotten to, are the casting directors. Because that's the problem with people not getting in the door, is that unless it says girlfriend in wheelchair or girlfriend hard of hearing, they're never getting in the door. And it used to be that way, by the way, racially too. If you didn't say a black girlfriend, they didn't get in, but now they do. We're past that. We get, if it says girlfriend, they'll read black, Asian, white, everybody, but they don't think of ability. And how do we change that?
So I think from my experience, there's a couple of things, especially with the industry, and I was so nice to see everyone, all my friends out here. But I'm going to speak as specifically as possible as I can to the filmmakers who have joined our community today. The first thing is it's about education. I think there's a lot of fear from casting directors, producers, writers about not only doing the right thing, but doing it in the right way, or that it's going to be really hard to do the right thing in the right way, So there's resistance in some form of it's going to be hard. I don't know how to audition someone who is deaf or hard of hearing. I don't know how to approach someone. Like, how do I do that? So for me, it started with a process of education, of finding out, like, what we need to do to make our spaces accessible as casting directors, what we need to do to make sides and scenes available for blind and low vision actors, like what that means. And without that information, I was just another guy, the former president of the CSA, walking around. And I was like, if I can educate casting directors as to how to audition appropriately and how to make space for performers with disabilities, that would be task number one. Task number two for me was I was so tired of hearing the actors don't exist. Like, everyone who doesn't exist in this room, raise your hands right now. Like, they do exist. And there's the thing for me, being in the business and being in Hollywood for 21 years from South Africa, was if everyone's saying the actors don't exist, then what are we doing about that? And also, why? Like, why don't the actors exist? And so that became my mission, is to find, and I truly believe that the actors did exist, they just hadn't been given the space to stand up and make themselves available, make their voices heard. And so back 2016, we held an open call for performers with disabilities, and we saw 800 performers with disabilities around the country in 48 hours. And I proved to the industry that the performers did exist, and now they needed access. You know, so those are the two things for me: is education, access, and then I think the other thing is we all grew up in the business through networking, right? And yes, you can put a breakdown out on Breakdown Express, and when you are looking specifically for someone with a disability or not, just someone with a disability play a normal role that doesn't mention the disability, you put it out on Breakdown Express and you're going to get limited resources back, right? The answer to that is to reach out to the community. You know, you have to start networking, and I started small, and then I met Nick, and then I met John, and then Dawn, and Eileen, and there's basically 20 people in this room now that are my network now, all right? And I did that through work, through not saying, oh, they don't exist. Go out and find the actors, they do exist. And then those three components really have led me to be able to help, and not only help, to just provide access.
Thank you. That's the thing that I always come up against. Whenever I meet a casting agent, that's the first thing I talk about. Why don't you just have people with disabilities come in for any role? It's very rarely going to be count them out for any reason. So have them come in the door. Jen, you've worked on shows. What are the things that you've seen done well with disability, and things that maybe chap your ass a little?
Do I get to be very honest about that second one?
I think you can. Yes,
Ex-
I've seen horrible things, and we all have.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Something I've seen done really well. My producing partner is John Rogers over at Kung Fu Monkey. And the most recent season of Leverage Redemption, we had a writer who's a wheelchair user because she's awesome. And instead of making her tell him everything she needed to make set accessible for her, he did the research. He found out and he presented her with several solutions and let her choose what worked best. He was proactive. So if you can make the spaces easier for people to be in, that will make it easier for them to be there. So weird how that works out. And the thing I've seen done very poorly, I'm immunocompromised. I have lupus, and it's a pain in my butt. But it's invisible, so people talk to me like they talk to able-bodied people. I get to see all the crap they don't want to share with the rest of the world. And that is both a privilege and really gross. So I had a script that John and I co-wrote for NBC. It was a pilot, it was a medical pilot, and because I live with a chronic illness, I thought it'd be really cool if a character with a chronic illness didn't die. So we wrote in a character with a chronic illness who was there the whole time. She had a visibly disabled love interest, and we had a producer friend who wanted to take it to a couple places elsewhere, and thought maybe we could we go out for some of the folks who were looking to fund things with disability representation in it? And he said no, because it's not actually about disability. And I couldn't, what? I'm disabled, my characters are disabled. How is it not about, oh, it didn't make you cry. You didn't feel bad, and you didn't feel superior at the end. So it wasn't about disability for you. And that has to stop. Our stories aren't sad. Our stories, well, sometimes they're sad. I have bad days. sometimes our stories have to be joyful too. Otherwise, we don't have a place to fit in that's worth being in.
Yes. Yeah. David, you're one of the most important figures in the whole disability rights movement out here. Well, you've been running committees that have like helped people. What are the things that you do on your show, Waffles Mochi?
Oh, yeah.
Like how do you? Yeah.
I worked on a show called Waffles and Mochi. Yes, I'm David Radcliffe. I'm a white man sitting down in a wheelchair with a gray T-shirt on. I worked on a show called Waffles and Mochi on Netflix that was technically for kids, but we hope everybody likes it. And right from the start, there was it was one of the first productions from the Obamas at that time, new production company. So there was a very clear mandate towards inclusion in all respects on that show. It was probably the kind of job that I will never get again because there was just sort of an open field of opportunity. Like if you had a cool idea, you could probably get Lionel Richie or Jack Black or, somebody to show up and do it. And I had also been on a show prior to that where production costs on a first season network show were a real point of issue, something that you think about a lot. So I came into this new kids show thinking about what is a producible idea that I have that, that'll help smooth the path to the board where we make all our decisions. And I pitched that our puppets, the main characters, would go visit a pizzeria, which was a real pizzeria that I found that was run by and staffed by deaf employees and deaf business owners. And I said, when I was growing up and even now, it's very rare that I see disabled people on TV working jobs and being, masters of their own domain and running a business and raising a family. And fortunately, I had a good relationship with the showrunner on that show, and his mother, his name's Jeremy Connor. He was also a creator of Drunk History, and his mother was a television writer who was disabled by a stroke. And so it was an interesting, coming together of my own disability experience and my awareness of what is not seen on TV that often, and also Jeremy's willingness to, because of his own experiences with disability, to sort of guide that story to the screen. And after that episode aired, they got a lot of messages from families of a lot of parents of deaf children that were, really, I won't use the word inspired, but were motivated by the stories that we were telling. And so I think that's, sometimes you can get away with that stuff more often on a streaming show or on a cable show. It certainly helps to have the former president of the United States involved. Strong recommend if you can work that out. So yeah, but it varies from network to network. But sometimes you get lucky, and it just takes. You don't want to be the person in the writer's room that pitches the same thing 3 times. So I felt like if I pitch this and it doesn't fly, I'm gonna have to find something else. But I had a welcoming environment for those kind of stories, and that doesn't always happen as often as it should.
You said at the beginning, I'll probably never have this opportunity again. Why? Were you that bad?
It was a rare kind of room where there were only 6 writers. We had a lot of support from the streamer. We had notes from the former first lady. And we had, a very clear mandate to have an inclusive space. And usually on other shows that I've worked on, you're not really thinking, I think kids TV in particular is really valuable for this, because when we get to like adult network shows, they're not really thinking about the message behind, their 14th episode of their police procedural that season. Not to slag on any other shows, but, there's a lot of shows out there that aren't really thinking about what is it that we are implanting in the minds of the audiences. And I think especially where disability is concerned, we are seen so rarely and so often told by people who are not disabled that when we get those opportunities, there's an extra sort of pressure to make sure to get things right. And it's unfair. It shouldn't feel like, I'm outside of a little bit of consulting that I did for Crip Camp with Jim Lebrecht and Sarah Boulder here. I've never worked with another disabled person on a project. That's not a project that I myself created. I've never been in a writer's room with another disabled person. So there is a sort of feeling of extra pressure and a little bit of isolation. Yeah.
Well, the beauty of what you're talking about, the messages, is that doesn't have to hurt. That doesn't have to hurt the shows, as Norman Lear taught us in the '70s. All his things were hilarious and had phenomenal messages, and he kind of took it to the next level, which brings me to two more people that we haven't spoken with yet. Kelly and Doug, who are both groundbreaking, and it makes me happy and it makes me sad because what they've done this year should have been done 50 years ago, and it's hard to believe that they're breaking grab today with these stories. But Daruma was one of the greatest movies of the year. Fantastic movie. It's about two people with disabilities. But it's not about disability at all. It has nothing to do with disability. They happen to be disabled, and that's all. But Tobias Forrest and John Lawson, where are you? Where'd he go? It's just a little masterpiece. And tell us about that, the difficulty of getting that made, and then we'll get over to you in a second. Don't go around.
How long do we have? I see a lot of really friendly faces in this room, people that I've recognized, and I want to kind of echo what Russell said about the community that was created in this. And I met Peter through John, and then Peter became our executive producer because he saw the film and he was like, I believe in this, and I want to help you get more out there. And I think I'm coming from an independent filmmaker point of view too, because I know a lot of people here are screening at Slamdance for the first time, and this may be the biggest festival that you get into. But for me, it took me 17 years to make this movie, and I'm not even kidding. It took from the time that I first thought about it to the time that we actually screened it. It was front to back 17 years, and it shouldn't take that long. And the concern for me and the way things are going right now in Hollywood right now, and I had a sidebar conversation about this right now, is that we're backsliding, we're losing ground in the gains that we've made. And, David saying like this kind of content just wasn't shown. And I have a feeling with the dismantling of all of the DEI programs that are happening right now at the studio level and in many other places, independent filmmakers have an enormous amount of power right now. And we can't give up and we can't let that backslide. So I don't want you to take 17 years to make your projects. And I mean, certainly I can't make another movie like we made our film, the way we made it, because it's too difficult.
From the beginning, when you started this movie, did you see it as these characters?
Oh, yeah.
Always.
Oh, always. Listen, I tell the story that, most people don't think about disability until they're confronted with it. I mean, I grew up signing, so I knew ASL, but I never really considered that to be a disability. That was just something that was normal in my world. But I had a relative of mine had a spinal cord injury. And I suddenly noticed how the world was completely inaccessible to them. And all the storylines that were being told was that it was better to die than live with a disability. And there was a really great Oscar-winning film that came out, close to when that happened. And I hated that movie. I hated it so bad. And I thought we could do something better. So I wrote a story about two broken people, emotionally broken people, trying to find themselves and become better men. And, I showed it to my agents at the time. Nobody was interested in it. I always wanted to cast it authentically. And it wasn't until I met my husband, Alexander Yellen, who's in the back room. He's the director of the film. But he said to me when we first started dating, he was like, let me read something that matters to you, because he wanted to get to know who I was better as a writer and a creative. So I gave him the script for Daruma, and I ran away to the other room because I didn't want to see what his reaction was going to be. And then a couple pages in, I hear him start laughing, and I run back in. I'm like, what is so funny? And he's like, this is hysterical. And I'm like, this is a draw. Like, what are you laughing at? And it was through his lens that he was like, no, this is a dark comedy. And he was like, what do you want to do with this? And I said, I really want to make it. I want to cast it authentically. This is something in my soul I feel should exist in the world. And he said, I'll direct it. He's like, if we find a way to make it, I'll direct it. And this was before he asked me to marry him, by the way. So he's like, I'll direct your movie. So, but we that we did. We struggled for 7 years. I think John mentioned at the top of this that we shot a proof of concept in 2018. When we thought we had funding at one point, and then that went away with COVID, and then we found a way just to piecemeal this together, like literally, like piece by piece. And the production hung on a knife edge because it was really at the height of COVID, and we were filming on a SAG contract, and one COVID case could have just blown the whole production. But I've never been on a set with people that so strongly believed in something that they wanted it to succeed. Everybody was working for far below what their rates were. Everyone was like, no, this needs to happen. And it was community that was born out of that. And the same has kind of been too with the reception that the film has had. I mean, I know so many of these faces in these rooms because you've come to our premieres and our online events, and it's tremendous. And I think festivals like Slamdance recognize the power of this sort of filmmaking. I could go on, Peter. You should stop me.
Well, I want to get back to the 17 years it takes to make a movie because it's been my experience like that too. But first, we're going to talk about that. And I'm also going to open it up, questions, so we get everybody. I'm sure you're sitting out there and we're not answering your questions, and I want to open that up. We will. Doug made a movie called Feeling Through. It was a short film, and it was nominated for an Oscar. And it's a fantastic thing. You could watch it on YouTube. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful movie. And it was the first time that one of the leads in a movie was a blind and deaf man. And it's hard to believe that that's the first time that has ever happened, but it did. And tell us about how that came to be.
Yeah, that was also took a long time to happen. But for me, as someone who's not disabled and grew up in an environment where I didn't know anyone who identified as disabled, and didn't see much about disability portrayed on TV or around me, I didn't know a lot about disability, and I had a pretty impactful personal experience now about that must have been 15 years ago, where I had an encounter with an individual who's deafblind one evening, which ended up being, what the film was heavily inspired by, though a lot of things were fictionalized. And this individual is someone who I, by random chance, had the opportunity to spend a portion of an evening with. And he was just an amazingly heartfelt, just guy who was just always cracking jokes and smiling and getting me to kind of get out of my funk where I was at in that evening. And he made a real impression on me as just a lovely person who I felt like I'd made a real connection with. And I also realized in that moment that I'd not only never met anyone who was deafblind, but I'd not really ever even thought about the deafblind community other than maybe learning about Helen Keller for 1 day or 2 days in grade school. So it kind of opened up a new space in my brain, in a sense. But also something that for years was something that was still a very memorable experience and something that I wanted to explore through story. And when I had the opportunity, well, not the opportunity, when I just had a moment where I was like, I'm ready to make this film, it was really, I guess I was kind of lucky that my instinct was correct, because I knew very little about disability in film and hadn't really, at the time, I don't even know if I'd really heard the term authentic casting, though logically I probably could have figured out what that meant. I just knew that it would probably be a much better movie if I cast someone who was deafblind. To me, it seemed kind of just like a logical, intuitive thing that I didn't think much more about that. And I also was, I guess wise enough to know that I didn't know very much. So I just Googled deafblind organization and called the first number that popped up, and this kind person picked up and bared with me on the phone while I kind of on the spot was just going like, I have this movie and it was inspired by this encounter I had, and I want to make it, and I want to cast an actor who's deafblind. Like, do you think I could do that? And I literally had not even thought about it yet. And he goes, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think you should reach out to, he gave me a couple other organizations to reach out to. And that really kind of has set me on like a 6-year journey to where I'm at now, where, in getting to make the film, collaborate with an organization called Helen Keller National Center, get to meet, connect, collaborate, and befriend so many people not just in the deaf-blind community, but just in the disability community as a whole, and have it be something where it's now such a, collaborating with individuals in the community is a very regular part of my life, and it's something that's just kind of a normal, day-to-day, week-to-week experience for me, but it's something I kind of fell into. And so I feel just a little bit of a responsibility, I guess, to just often speak to people who were me prior to that encounter and say, hey, just because you maybe don't have much experience in learning about or connecting with the community doesn't mean you can't collaborate with the community. And as a number of people in this room have noted, that community makes up as much as a quarter or a fifth of the world's population when we're talking about the disability community as a whole. So if you're a storyteller and you want to tell stories about the world around you, you are probably going to include people with disabilities in those stories because they make up a large portion of the world. So a lot of it, to me, started off as common sense before it was something that I got a real master class of an education from so many people in the community. And I'm just really fortunate that I didn't make a dumb decision right off the bat.
Well, not only that, it's kind of a miracle the actor you did find. That guy was unbelievable. I can't remember his name. What's his name?
Robert Tarango.
Unbelievably good. This guy, and as it turns out, there aren't a lot of actors out there who are blind and deaf. And this guy said he always wanted to be an actor, but he thought, how am I going to be an actor? And all of a sudden one day he's knocking on the door, and he wasn't even, he was working at the place that he went to and found him. And this guy's got a depth. It's just an incredible thing. And that's what happens when you go that way. Talking about how hard it is to get these things done. Everybody out there is like, God damn it, I've been trying this forever. But yeah, I know. I did too. I was out here 9 years before I got anything done. And it takes a while. Always does. And even when you have a hit movie, the next one's hard. Trust me. It's a weird thing. You think, oh, it's an easy sailing now. It's hard always. So you got to remember that. But if you push, look at Nick. Nick, I remember when I met Nick, he was doing little corner things, he's working at the little stand-up clubs. And now he's on stage with who? Nate Bargatze, playing for stadiums because he's just kept going. But it doesn't happen overnight. I know, that's an amazing story. And every one of my, Dumb and Dumber took 5 years to get made. Mary, 10 years. They were all old scripts that we redid. And even to this day, I just did a movie that we were working on for 15 years. So I'm saying don't give up on that stuff because it's hard. It's always hard. And it's the ones who give up that, they don't get it made. But if you keep pushing, all of a sudden, the stars line up. And you don't know what it is. You run into that guy, that actor, where you just get the perfect person at the perfect time. And I look at Dumb and Dumber, which took us 5 years to get made. And if I had made it right away, I would have been making it with some schlump. But instead, I get, Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels. They came along at that point, and it happened. And also, I want to talk about the moment we're in. And first of all, everybody on the panel, feel free to pipe up whenever you want. I want to talk about the moment we're in. This is a rough moment. 504 is in jeopardy. They're threatening it. There's 17 attorney generals that are knocking it down. These are the rights of people with disabilities. We're going to go push back. They're going to try to push it back if we don't start squawking. And everybody has to be loud right now and say, fuck off. That ain't happening. We're not going backwards. It's an important thing. It's like if you saw Crip Camp, which is probably my favorite documentary of all time. It's a masterpiece. It really is. As Jen LeBlanc, that group of people that were in that camp changed the world. And they were the ones who made 504 happen. And Jim, I want you to talk a little bit about where we are. Here, take this.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm not going to eat up a lot of time. I have some flyers up here that I'll leave on the edge of the stage. But right now, what Pete said is correct. There's 17 attorney generals. They're trying to make the 504 regulations unconstitutional. And if you saw Crip Camp, that a whole bunch of disabled people wound up taking over a federal office in 1977 for 28 days, had a sit-in to force the Carter administration to sign these regs. And what they are, very simply says, you cannot discriminate on the basis of disability if you receive money from the federal government. This forced hospitals and universities and other public entities like that to actually become accessible. And it was a huge problem. They ain't only going after 504. They're going after the ADA, which covers the rest of the world. And so if you want to have authentic shows, we need to protect our ability to stay in our homes, to stay employed, to be part of society. Because this isn't BS. They don't care if we live or die. They simply don't. This is, again, a life and death struggle. So thank you, folks.
Pete, I want to ask you a question real fast, though, first, because you've been a big supporter, a big advocate for people with disabilities, and we met years ago through a mutual friend, Danny Murphy, and Danny and I were good friends, and then we ended up running into you somehow. And, well, I know how, but anyway, that was something about Mary. I think Danny was in the film before that, and then he was in that film, everybody recalls. But your latest film, Ricky Stanicky, was shot in New Zealand, Australia, and you had 10 people with disabilities with speaking roles in that film in Australia that were cast in Australia. And to me, that's the kind of support that you need from a director, producer, that even though you're halfway around the world, you still sought out. And they weren't just like background rolling, they had speaking roles. So
Well,
Talk a little bit.
my goal is honestly to make it a real world, the movies that you see. And if you don't have people with disabilities, being that 20 to 25% of our country has a disability, it's a bullshit movie. It's fake world. And unless you're doing a movie about that kind of a fake world, I'm going to always put them in. And I try to do that. But by the way, I didn't do it initially. My first movie, I was like, just looking, I want to get a movie made. The last thing I was thinking was that. And when it was Dumb and Dumber, and when and that little kid in the wheelchair, he was not disabled. And I remember when it came out, my friend Annie Murphy, who's a quadriplegic, came up and goes, "What the fuck, dude? You got nobody in the movie with disability." I was like, "Sorry." I completely forgot. And I was humiliated. I was so embarrassed. And it was like not something I was aware I was thinking of. I should have been. And ever since then, I've gone way out of my way to make sure that, I want to put, and not always in roles where you can see it. Like if a cab driver, I'll put somebody who's, a quadriplegic driving the cab because they're not actually driving it, We're on the thing. He's just talking, nobody will know. Yeah, and I've tried to, it was a wake-up call for me, and yeah, that's what we try to do. But it's really just common sense. If you don't do it, you're not a good filmmaker because the world, it's a fake world.
You've really paid it forward, though, Peter. You really have. You've paid it forward many times. I mean, by supporting independent film and championing disability rights, and even showing up to a panel like this. I mean, you really have done tremendous work.
I'm so happy to be here and then remake now. In any case, why don't we open up questions? Yeah, anybody has a question, and we'll,
And just so we have time for everybody's question, we know all you wear multiple hats, and you're all actors, and you all want to go to work, and you all want your film produced, and you all want it on streaming channels, and we all know all that. Please just stick to the question. Tell us your name and what you want to do. So everybody we know is multiple hat wearers.
Hi, I'm Eileen Gruba, and I know most of you up there. And Pete, to this day, one of my greatest experiences in this industry was being down in Miami on Stuck on You with Murphy. And I still get moved when I think about how your rap party went and how everyone felt so included and just accepted for who they are. That's what we've been fighting for decades. My question for all of you is, you know, a lot of us have been in this for decades and we have lots of projects, and there seems to be a bottleneck that, as you said, it can be very hard even when you've had big films. And I'm noticing even when we have A-list producers, it's very, very challenging to get the people they need in order to get the funding, you know, to look at or attach or even consider working on a film that includes a lot of people with disabilities. So like the bottleneck seems to be at the gatekeepers. Do you collectively, any of you, have ideas on how we can get past these gatekeepers without annoying the living crap out of, or without having to run and catch you when you're at a panel to say, hey, can you look at this? Because that's not fun to have to keep chasing people down. But how do we get past these gatekeepers who have an automatic no or fear for this community, or say things like, well, you're not a name, so we can't pass your stuff along?
So I'm not the producer at the table, but I do want to say that from my experience, I have these conversations because producers will come to me and either say one of two things. The first one is, we need a name in order to get this movie financed, right? And then they go, well, give us a performer with disability with a name that's going to finance the movie. And I'm like, oh, I think you're thinking about it the wrong way around. You know what I mean? I think there's other opportunities to place an actor with quote unquote a name to get the movie financed and still keep the authenticity of the script intact, right? And then that's one type of producer that I talk to, and then I'll let the producers chime in. The other type is, I just did a movie now that's doing really well called The Paper Bag Plan, and it's with Cole Massey. Cole Massey plays the lead in this movie, and that producer writer, director, producer came to me and he said, I can't make this movie unless I find the lead Billy. And Billy is the kid with MS, right? He said, I'm not making this movie if I can't find Billy. Find me Billy. And I found him Cole Massey, who had auditioned on another project before, and he fell in love. And after that had happened, he never stopped making that movie. He ended up pulling funds from friends. He raised Kickstarter money. He could not quit the movie because I found him Billy. So those are the two ways to kind of look at it, you know, is not, you have to carry on. You have to, if you've got to make this movie, you have to make the movie. And that, I hear too often, if we don't get someone attached, we can't continue to make the movie.
I would like to chime in on this one because we did make an independent feature and we made it completely outside of the studio system. You know, we crowdfunded, we put in our own money, we negotiated favors, we got a camera grant from Panavision. We did it. I mean, I can't make another movie like this. I can't, which is why the support is so important. You know, it breaks my heart when people ask me for a screener link because I might just rent it on Amazon, please, because we didn't get an acquisition. And the problem is that most films are not being acquired right now. Like most independent movies are not getting acquired, period. You're going to find yourself going with a mid-tier distributor, doing a TVOD window, hopefully getting an SVOD deal, moving through your AVOD, and then shuffling it around. You know, and this is a reason why a lot of people aren't investing in independent films, is because the market is just so bleak right now. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't exist though. And I really do think that a new ecosystem needs to be developed for independent film, and we need to look at it differently. For me, independent film is an art form, and I'm not really sure that profit should be tied to art like that. So there's, I'm working on fomenting a couple of ideas on how to approach this moving forward. But Eileen, the answer is that you have to do it yourself. You have to find a way to do it. Because again, I mean, in this current environment, and then the way that they're slashing DE&I programs and firing staff members that were letting people in, what can you do now except but take up the mantle and say, I have no other choice. I cannot live with myself if I do not do this. So I know it's a tough answer, but it's just, for me as an independent filmmaker, like that is the reality that we're in right now.
I think one of the things that's particularly hard about this industry always, but particularly when you are trying to do something that people are afraid to do because it's new to them, and new is scary. You have to really sit with and accept the fact that there is no one way. Your way is going to be different than mine, and they just are all going to be tailor-made, and there's nothing we can do about that. And that's okay, because everyone who has ever had a film made got it done because they were in a community who agreed with them that it needed to be done. So find your community. Find the people who will give you $5,000 towards your movie. Find the people who already care and work with them first, because those are the people who are going to show up for you. You can't convince the studio boss who doesn't care about DEI that it's important. You can convince him that he's leaving money on the table that he cares about. So if you're going in and you need to convince someone, say, that you want to include disabled writers in your writer's room, or you want to include disabled characters in your script, it's not, I'm doing this because it's important. I'm doing it because this needs to be done for the good of humanity, although it does, and we know. You're doing it because it helps you to make your project different from everything else. It helps you to stand out in a noisy field. Give it to them in language they already understand, because they're not going to speak yours.
I think also it's important to think about how we get more of us on the other side of the desk, or in the other side of like the casting environment, because we all hang out with each other. I've seen many of you at different events. There is a very strong community, but it also becomes a bit of a bubble, so that when I go into a writer's room for a TV show and I say, as I said in one of the rooms I was in, did you guys know that sub-minimum wage exists? Like, this could be really cool if we did a story about XYZ, because it's still legal to pay disabled people sub-minimum wage. And the entire room, and these are all people that make a lot of money because they're on network television, no one in the room but me had any idea that it was still legal to pay disabled people sub-minimum wages. So these are the kind of rooms. What's that? Yeah, it didn't affect, my pay was good that year. but so then you go into meetings to pitch things, and you have, as many of you have probably experienced already, conversations that are well-intentioned but really uncomfortable. And so we have to get more of us on the side of the desk that then is able to go to their boss and say, hey, you know me, I have a disability too. Wouldn't it be cool if we told disability stories? Because sometimes it just feels like you're kind of shouting into the wind against folks that may have good intentions but don't really understand the lives that we're living. And the more stories we tell and are able to get on screen, the better that understanding becomes. And the more we're able to fight things like this 504 fight that Jim mentioned, because the more of us that get seen in these projects, the more we are seen as, unfortunately, the more we are seen as valuable. Also, I would mention, just off of what Jim said, there's also 4 airlines right now that are suing the Department of Transportation because they don't want to have to deal with, for example, taking care of wheelchairs on airplanes. So if you look at Rights on Flights, rightsonflights.com, I think, Sophie Morgan runs it. It's a whole other fight that we need to be invested in if we want to, say, travel. So, yeah.
Doug, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, those are all great
Okay.
responses. So I have
Oh, hey, okay, there's more.
the thought that comes to mind is not necessarily a direct answer to that question, but maybe an anecdote that comes to mind. Back to Robert, who was our actor who was deafblind in the film. In getting the opportunity to take that film around the country and share it at a lot of accessible screenings where a lot of other people from the deafblind community were present, I had a number of times individuals from the community tell me that they were now interested in acting because it was something that they were maybe curious about before, but in seeing Robert do it, it was like, why can't I do it? And that was really an amazing experience until nothing really happened from it. And I didn't really know how to help make something happen. And I think, I don't mean this to be a downer. I think what I was going to say from that is that there's just much deeper systemic changes that need to happen in a lot of ways, that some of which are maybe fairly slow moving. Not that there aren't plenty of faster moving routes that some other people have spoken to, but more investment in long-term systemic changes just to, people were asking, a couple casting directors reached out about Robert, but as far as these other individuals who were interested in acting, they couldn't find an accessible acting class. So there was no other actors, and most people want to hire someone that has training. Not every filmmaker wants to work with, someone who's new to the craft. So how do you start creating acting classes that are accessible for people who are deafblind so that you can have trained deafblind actors, right? And that's kind of a longer term investment, and that needs to be happening too. These longer term systemic changes that are going to allow access for people who can't even start the journey. And I know that wasn't necessarily directly the question, but that anecdote felt relevant in some way.
You know, the one way to get in, guaranteed way, the no-brainer way, is to have a script. That's it. And that's happened a lot, mostly for white people, white guys. Like, you know, Rocky. When he wrote that script, Stallone wrote that script, he was homeless. And he wrote it, and they wanted to buy it, and they said, great. You know, he goes, okay, but I'm Rocky. And they're like, no, you're not Rocky. Burt Reynolds is Rocky, or Ryan O'Neal, or, you know, Clint Eastwood. Hey, we want a star. And he was like, no, I'm playing Rocky. And they offered him first 20 grand, and then it got up to 350 grand. Back in 1975, they offered him for that, just to go away. Just give us the script. And he was, nope, not leaving. And finally they said, all right. And they cut a deal with him. They gave him 1 month, $1 million to make that movie. And if he fell one day behind, he was fired. And they could bring in whoever they wanted. And that's a whole nother story. But the point is, that script was fucking great. And somebody was going to make that movie. And if you can write a movie, and that's what, you know, what you do, like, you know, I didn't start writing till I was in my mid-20s. And I never had a movie made till I was 37. But I got better. I started writing and writing and writing, and I finally got to the point where they had the, you know, they liked the stuff and they were willing to make it. And if you have a great script, it's you know, you know, Goodwill Hunting. You know, those guys, they forced their way into that movie. They didn't want them. Those guys were banana heads. Nobody wanted them around, but they loved the script, and they said, we're doing this movie, and they couldn't, they said, sorry, it's us or nobody. We're not going it. And that's the number one way. That's the number one way. That's the no-brainer way. If you have a masterpiece, and it's not just a good script, it's a masterpiece. Make something phenomenal. When it's really, really, really good, make it better. Make it where they can't say no. That's the first. Number two is what Nick does, which is Nick, you know, the Easter Seals, those movies, you know, the short films that he's doing, I picked 3 or 4 actors out of those things, and I would never have seen them. And there's one actress, and I apologize, I'm blanking right now. She's a deaf actress. Do you know what I'm talking about? She was in a movie a couple years ago. She's on the list. I have a list of people. Like, I'm just blanking on her name. I'm putting her in something one day. As soon as that thing comes along, because she's got some. She's got a depth. Like, she is just great. And I've been looking for it, like, that was like 3 years ago, and I keep looking for the right time to put her in. But she's getting in something because I was made aware of her by being on that. So the point is, anytime you could make a short film, do, because you're putting yourself out there and you could get noticed. That's the second best way to get in, you know. And we do take notice. Like I've honestly, I notice a lot of people. I put people in TV shows that I noticed in short films, like nothing little films, but they became like, you know, main characters. So I highly recommend that you do that. Should we take a couple more questions? And yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. So I know a lot of people here are already people that are working within the disability inclusive filmmaking community, and I know there's maybe hopefully a lot of people here that are interested in becoming part of it. One of the things that I personally, as a programmer and someone who's participated in the Disability Film Challenge, and know a lot of you up there already, I appreciate the community that Slamdance brings to the festival and having everybody be here. And I know that there's other organizations. Forward Doc is one that Jim has on his shirt that's great for disability inclusive documentaries. There's also Respectability and Real Abilities. So my question is, networking is a big part of this. We've hit on that topic.
are there other organizations or other groups that you guys can recommend that we can go to build those networks, to find more of a community other than just like, I know Eileen, but like we could show up and there's an acting class or there's a writing group or there's production advisement or producing advisement that that we can start to congregate to further these ideas that we have, rather than kind of floating, hoping that we'll clash into each other like random atoms or something.
Well, I'll tell you this. In addition to working with Kung Fu Monkey, I also run something called Threshold Workshops with a very dear friend of mine who is far smarter than I am. You should talk to him. He's better than me. We teach TV writing fundamentals specifically to people who have a harder time getting into the industry. We have also dabbled in teaching some other things. Find me a group of 10 people and send me an email and I'll set up a class for you. Any of you.
There's a nonprofit. It's only 2 years old, which I got connected to through the Disability Film Challenge, called Cinematography for Actors. I have no interest in being an actor, and I know very little about cinematography. But they do great workshops and create collaborative spaces that are. This is not a disability. Well, let me back up a second. I think it's important that more and more disabled people put themselves in spaces that are not disability specific for the reasons that I mentioned before. Like, we have to be seen everywhere. Cinematography for Actors is not specifically a disability organization, but I found out about it through the Disability Film Challenge because they did a lot of mentoring. And the project that I'm working on right now, we are pursuing fiscal sponsorship through them. So follow me on Instagram so I can hit you up for money in several months. But I encourage you to check them out. They were founded by two very industrious, awesome young women. That one was a cinematographer and one was is an actor, and they joined forces and created something really cool. So that'd be a great place to network and build community and create your own stuff. All the things we're talking about.
Yes.
Yo,
First of all, I just want to say that you guys made our day today, finally, in the world. Like, I'm coming originally from Russia, and I've been living here like for 6 years almost in America. I've done more than 30 jobs, and I speak 12 different languages. And I just want to say that I studied Meisner, and once I studied that technique, I just understood like more about people with disability. And I think that was the day actually when I really understood what it means to be disabled, because so our teacher was telling, like, for example, if there is a chair and someone needs to skip the chair, that people with disability will actually skip that chair with a way that us able people, we were not able to come up with that way. So once I saw that, once I heard that, I was just amazed by that. And I just want to say that who knows if right now, even like right now here, all these people, like, first of all, we're all people, but I want to also say that we never know who actually has that, heart and the talent for acting, because I never knew that I'm able to learn 12 languages if it wasn't for acting. Like, I saw a backstage post and it was written, if you speak 12 languages, you could stand out on auditions in the US. And that started being like my blue mark, my blueprint. Like, I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was one of the person that really motivated me. And sir, Peter, you were talking about Rocky Balboa, and that speech when he says, "We ain't gonna believe this, but you used to fit right here. I'd hold you up and say to your mother, this kid's gonna be the best kid in the world." And that's something that resonated with me. And, I spent each hour for each part of the planet learning 12 different languages and coming to America because I believe that we together, everyone in this world, we can change the world. And I have a question, like, with this brilliant talent, like, how can I help the world just through movies? And like, because I'm an actor and I really want to be heard for once in my life, that someone can see that there is a new path, that there's a new way where we can connect through different cultures and not being separated, which I really don't like. Like, just if we think about the world, like what's happening and everything. And I think that acting is what I say all the time. Acting is a spiritual quest for touching human feelings. So I do believe that there is a way, even in today's world, where there's all these streaming services and everything, and like independent filmmakers and actors, self-individualists who believe in their dreams and they come to this beautiful country of the possibilities, that there is a way that we can come up with a new innovation. Everyone is talking about innovations here today. Everyone have been talking for 10,000 hours, but what I want to say is, like, if there are people like that, very different skills, like learning Chinese, Arabic, different all these languages, what is the way in Hollywood, in today's world, that we can make the difference, that we can connect the cultures from all over the world, that we can promote those movies that we make in those languages and connect? Because what I believe in, if you speak a language, if you speak English, you go into someone's head. But if you speak someone's native language, you go into someone's heart.
Well, that's really true. That's fantastic. I like your passion, and I think movies have always done that. Like, one of my, and I don't necessarily think that you have to speak that language. Like, some of the Russian novels are the greatest novels ever. And, they were written in Russian, but, translated for us, and we understood them entirely. And movies can move people in great ways. In your case, you're an unusual person. 12 languages, you took it upon yourself to learn them all. You're taking acting, you're doing everything. Make a short film. Write a short film, or find someone who's a writer. Not everybody's a writer, not every actor. I found that out. And they all think they are. You give them the script, they want to punch it up. Like, why don't you just act? And but find a good actor, a good writer, or do it yourself, and make a short film about a guy like you who's got a very unusual, like, strong point of view, and put it out there. Put it on YouTube. Put it in short film festivals, and that's the beginning. Always go forward. Do something. Like, always, you got to push forward. That is the truth. And if you keep pushing if you're sitting there waiting for shit to happen, ain't happening. It's not happening.
I want to build on what Peter. Oh, sorry, David. You do have to do something. You have to do something. And for us, the start for our movie was to make a proof of concept, which really almost became shot for shot the trailer that we used. We wanted to show how we wanted to cast it. We wanted to show, Alex's style of directing and cinematography. And then we wanted to have this sort of like an indie road trip feel to it. And we also took that proof of concept around and we showed it to people to get them on board. And I mean, the proof of concept maybe cost a couple grand to make. It wasn't terribly expensive. We shot it over a couple days. But that became single-handedly our best tool for marketing ourselves. And subsequently, when we had to cut a trailer, we already had the blueprint for one. But once we put our flag in the ground and we're like, we're doing this, people started to come on board. But you can't wait for anybody to be the one to pick you up and lift you and get you going. One of the best lessons I learned as a writer, I mean, that's my vocation, is mostly as a writer. I had a meeting with a development exec that I absolutely love, and a different one, Jen. I adore your mom is my favorite.
It's okay, I'll get over it someday, Kelly.
I had a meeting with a different one, and she had just started working for a very big name in Hollywood, very big. And I was so excited because I had a script that was just perfect, and I wanted to talk to her. I was like, I really want you to send this and have her take a look. And she was like, whoa. She was like, just a minute. It's taken this person 17 or 18 years or however long it was to get this overall deal. The first projects that she's going to make are her own. And I was like, oh, that was just a really powerful lesson, because now, when people bring me scripts and stuff, I love taking a look at other people's work, but I'm going to focus on my own stuff because I know that I'm going to get behind it and get it done. So if you have the passion and the drive, you really do need to start with yourself and get that going first.
I would also, and this is coming from a personal place myself, I would caution against setting out to change the world with a story, because I think that it becomes self-defeating in a way. Like, oh, this has to be, and I think particularly with disability, when I think about, if I'm writing someone with a disability that is not my own, I can feel myself getting too nervous. And I'm like, if I am chairing a committee about disability and feeling a little bit nervous about it, then someone else who doesn't even have a disability is probably extra nervous. And I can't expect everything I write to be transformative for the way that, disabled people are treated or the way that, opportunities happen. So I think you got to focus on telling a story that's meaningful to you and think about the great beyond later, because you can't control how something's going to be received. And it's not fair to yourself to say, like, this script has to be perfect and it has to say everything I want to say and it has to do all the right things. Does that make sense?
I think David is exactly right. You have a two-part job. Your first job is to fix what you can reach. Your second job is not to underestimate your own reach. But you're not going to do it by yourself. You're just not. So you've got to count on everybody else in this room to pick up their part too. So it's okay. I get it. It's overwhelming. But it doesn't all have to be on you, and it doesn't all have to be today.
I think we're ready to wrap this up. I'm getting something over here. Okay, I want to say in closing a couple things. First of all, and this has nothing to do with any religion, pray. And this is why you pray. This is why I pray. I'm not anything, but I pray because it focuses my brain on what I want. I do it in the morning, I do it at night, and it's like 2 minutes, 5 minutes tops. Just, this is what I'd like to accomplish today, help me do this. The universe wants to help you. I've come to know this. It does. And I look at my life, and I've told this story a few times. I apologize if if you've heard it already, but it's like I was like 25-year-old piece of shit sitting back east, bad salesman, not good at anything, really always failed at everything, high school, college, everything. And I got it in my head I wanted to write. And it had been gnawing at me for about 3 or 4 years, but I figured, well, I missed that boat. I'm 25. I was an accounting major. So it finally, I remember I finally woke up one day and it was my birthday and I was embarrassed at who I was. I was like, you fucking never did anything, ever. So I thought, fuck it, I'm going to start writing it. If I'm 28 and nothing's happening, at least I gave it a shot and I'll feel good about myself. Well, from that moment, the universe is like, fucking A, good for you. If you're following your heart, which I'd never done in my life, the universe wants to help you. There's something there. I don't know what it is. There is something magical that wants to help you, and it does. And it helped. Like my way is like I came out here, and my first roommate was Woody Harrelson. He's just out here, hanging around, doing nothing. He was like an extra in a movie and was here. And then I sold the script and I sent it off to, I didn't have an agent, and I sent it off to an agency. And the first guy to call me back was Richard Lovett, who's like the greatest agent who ever lived. One thing after another. And because I went forward with what was in my heart and did it. And you can all do that. I believe that. You must push forward and think about what you want, focus on it, and it will happen. And finally, I'll leave you with this. We're in a shitty time right now, really bad time politically, and there's a lot of this. But let me tell you, progress doesn't go like this. It doesn't go that way. It goes like this. It gets a little better on every hump. And it got better in the 70s, and then it kind of evened out, and then it got better in the last 10 years, and now it just took a big dive. But it's going to go way back up again. It will go back up, but you've got to believe it, and you've got to push it. But it's up to you. Don't lay down as this shit's coming. Start squawking, because we're getting a big fucking tidal wave coming at us, and we have to swim right past it. Thank you very much.